This is a truly amazing place, the Natural Bridge in Natural Bridge State Park. At the state park, there is also a Monacan Indian village. That's living history, living in the way, storing the goods in the way it's been done for hundreds of years. Vicki Ferguson is the lead guide there. You can see some of her incredible handmade jewelry. And after meeting and talking with her, I went down by a river near there. This was the summer. There's the Blue Ridge Mountains in the background of Virginia, and went for a swim. It was just beautiful. And I found these shells. And I thought that maybe I could use these shells as a memory, as a reminder of my incredible trip to this rural area. So I cleaned the shells because I was thinking of maybe making a bracelet or a necklace with them. And I drew them just to get a sense of the shells, to get to know them a little bit better. And then I asked Vicki, how could I drill holes in them to make the shells into something, to attach them. And she suggested to soak the shells overnight. And you can see there a few of them broke because I was impatient. But then I soaked them and tried to be very patient and careful when I was drilling, wondering where to drill the hole in the center or on the side. And I was just using an old school drill here, like an old egg beater. And here's my workspace. I was listening to different music while I was working, and I asked Vicki how could I attach the shells, and she suggested using hemp to make my bracelet. So I did some different drawings to try to figure it out. I drilled the hole. I experimented with threading the hemp through the hole, and you can see different types of hemp. It was fraying a little bit. I also met Tatanka at the village, and he told me about how wampum belts were made out of shells and how each belt told a story and contained history. And I looked online for some inspiration. It was a wampum shell bracelet, he told me, and he told me that those shells had meaning. So I thought, how can I put those shells together? Which way do I want them to knock together? What noise might it make? I thought maybe the hemp wasn't so good. Could I use wire? But that seemed a little bit more modern. And I was really close to finishing, but it wasn't good enough, so I almost stopped. Here I just did there was shells and stuff in my art book, so I kind of drew over them, played with the shells. I put some crazy glue on the end of the hemp so I could thread it through the shells more effectively. And so I was wondering, how do I attach the bracelet at the end? And I checked in with Vicki. She was my email guide going back in time with creative ideas. So I needed to learn how to tie a certain knot. And eventually I had it together. I had all the shells together. I had a little clasp here. That's the clasp of how it held together. But what happened is there was nothing to keep the shells apart. And as I wore the bracelet, although it stayed together, all the shells ended up kind of gathering together like this. So I said, I have to go back to the drawing board here. So I thought, what if I tied little knots in between the shells? So I was trying to figure out how many knots to do. A friend of mine who's a jewelry maker said knots are good. And so I had all my shells drilled. I started threading it together. I had the different tying knots in between the shells to separate them. Just some trial and progress, as I put it. And then finally, this was really a couple of years in the making between the time I was down in Virginia and completed the project, inspired by the bridge. I was also inspired by Vicki Ferguson, who patiently guided me through making this bracelet and taught me so much about history and culture in this country.